Hello. Is it you? Is it me you're looking for? Probably is. Everybody's looking for me. Anyways, is there like a little clicker jammy thing, or am I going to have to just bop the thing every time? All right, I'm going to stand over here. I'm going to bop the thing, but I walk around, so we'll see how it goes. As stated previously, my name is Erin, and I am very excited to be here to talk to you about experimentation for engineers. Just to give you a little bit more information about myself as like, why am I here talking about experimentation? It's because I've been doing experimentation for well over a decade now. I first started off my career in the top left-hand corner of this fancy little career map, designing, coding, and experimenting on email marketing programs. Then I moved to a company called Booking.com based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I got to design and code and experiment on all of their mobile platforms as well as the desktop platform. I spent some time as a product manager on mobile data science-y stuff, so I got to analyze a lot of experiments, run like recommendation algorithm experiments, super fun. And I also spent some time leading a design team at Booking.com, experimenting on B2B complex applications. And now, because if that's not enough, I am working in design systems and accessibility, so working across all the different platforms in order to scale experimentation at different organizations. So running experiments basically anywhere and any place I can get my hands on things. So that's why I'm talking about this today. And like stated previously, I'm currently writing a book about experimentation. Go figure. So, and the topic that I'm going to talk to you all today about is called, what is this? Oh, look at this. This is a magical, thank you. You were such a wonderful fairy. I appreciate it. All right, let's just, I can sing for you while I set this up if you want. Da, 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 da. Do y'all do karaoke here? I'm sure a room full of iOS engineers like, what are you talking about? Yeah, you're lucky that we're here in person, right? Okay, let's see here. What is this little thing? Do I have the powers? Is there an on switch? Nope. Oh, no, it didn't prompt me. I'm just gonna, that was very sweet. You're still a fairy, okay? You didn't lose those powers. Fairy points for trying. So anyways, I'm here to talk to you all today about conversion design, which is something that I've made up, but it's legitimate. And when I talk about conversion design, so you're probably going to say, like, why did Janina invite a designer to come talk to us at an iOS conference? And I'm here to tell you, it's because when I talk about design, I'm not talking about just making it pretty or adding drop shadows to everything and making things really not performant. As Pradna said, like, that's not the kind of design I'm talking about. Right, exactly. The kind of design I'm talking about is capital D design. So actually creating things with intention and mindfully solving problems in like a very thoughtful way. So that's the kind of design that I'm here to talk to you about, because design comes in many types of mediums, and in your case, for iOS, your medium is code, so it's just as relevant here as well too. So, moving on with it. So what we're going to talk about today, just so you all know what's going on, first we're going to talk about what is conversion design anyway, why is it important, and how and like what kind of impact it has on organizations, as well as leveling up engineers within organizations to make sure that your voices are heard and your ideas are acted upon. And then I have a how to do it section, which is really brief and it just gives a couple of tools. And then we have the but section, which is like, but Erin, experimentation. So this is the section about common objections that I hear from people, specifically engineers, about why they don't experiment and why they think it's a bad idea. And then I come up with some counter objections to help answer some of those questions that might be churning in your head. And then I have a couple of fun examples, if we have time, just to dig into it to show you some examples of mobile experiments that I've run in the past. So without further ado, is that a word? Ado? Yeah, okay. What and why of conversion design? So many of you probably work in a product design and development process that is based on linear thinking and is visualized in a very linear way, where there's typically 4 steps that you follow, where you research, you ideate, you design, and then you deliver the thing. And typically, iOS engineers get brought in on the 4th step of the process, where you are told, can you please execute and deliver this thing, right? And then you're just like, why did they do it this way? What is the purpose of this? And you're just trying to do it the best you can, right? That's a really old school way of doing things, in my opinion. It's very waterfall. And there's actually well, I'll tell you about why it's not the greatest. So it's not great because it's usually in the first 2 phases that all of the ideation happens. So with this way of working, it's very narrow in terms of the perspectives you bring to the table and the quality and breadth of the ideas that get put into the backlog to work on. So that's one reason it's not a good way of working. Another reason it's not a good way of working is because it's extremely high risk to the business and the user experience. If you just say, we have to deliver these 5 features this next quarter or half year, and then you just release it, a lot of times you have no way of understanding how have I actually impacted the business and the customer experience. And spoiler alert, typically it's easier to make things worse than it is to make things better or to make no difference at all. Another thing is, because it's a linear process, it's really unrealistic and it doesn't necessarily capture the complexity of how the real world works and team dynamics. So the solution I'm about to present to you will hopefully handle that. And then there is this preconceived notion that working in this way tends to be faster because it feels fast, because you get a thing, you build it, you ship it, you move on to the next thing, you build it, you ship it, yada, yada, yada. So it's not that great because it gives the perception of being fast. And this is the proposal that I have called the conversion design process, which is actually based on systems thinking instead of linear thinking. And you have to imagine the animation. I'm not an animation designer, so just imagine these little wheels are turning. So this is a system diagram. See, just use your imaginations. You see it? Okay, good. So it's spinning, it's in constant motion, right? And of course you start with the understand phase where you research, you hypothesize. Who took science class? Y'all had science class in school, right? So we all know from high school or whatever the equivalent is in Singapore how to write a hypothesis and the basics of the scientific method. So here we're combining design, business, and science to come up with a new way of working. Then you prioritize based on what you think will have the most impact. Design and develop, where y'all probably are going to have the most impact in the conversion design process. Then the thing that really differentiates the conversion design process from the other ways of working is the A/B test. How many of y'all have run A/B tests before? Who here's a tester? It looks like not half, maybe. Oh, now I'm trying to math. This is not good. Somebody you're talking about statistics being like, oh, that looks like counting. Okay, cool. So a decent amount of you. But the A/B test is what distinguishes this from other ways of working. And then from there, when you're done running the A/B test, it provides you with statistically significant data for you to be able to make really considered decisions with. So that's the overview of the process. And why this suggestion is better than the previous linear thing is, first of all, you get broad ideation because in the conversion design process, everybody cycles through the system together, maybe at different times. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention that's really important. You might see here at the end of the system, it actually, the main output of the system is knowledge. So as you have information, you're able to make better decisions, and then you can grow and learn more, and then that knowledge gets fed back into the system again so you can understand better, ask better questions in your research, and then make more meaningful impact. So it becomes something that's called a positive reinforcing loop in systems thinking. So why is this good? Broad ideation. It also lowers risk, and the A/B test is the part of the process that specifically lowers the risk. It helps you makes better decisions based on probability of whether or not something will be better than what was currently there. It also handles the complexity better because you're able to see all of the moving pieces in the data of stuff that you've potentially messed up, and it's also more effective. So like I said before, people like the linear process because they deliver things and they move on and they have the perceptions of things being fast, but actually this is more effective, and I'll show you why. So let's dig into each one of these things point by point. Broad ideation. So in the first 2 steps of the primary, the linear process, you usually have product people, businessy people, talking about their KPIs or the whatever, UX people, coming up with ideas and populating the backlog. The problem with that way of working and not involving engineers in the ideation process is that you get a very narrow perspective. So you have only 2 kinds of brains, user experience brains and business brains, sitting at the table putting the ideas in the backlog. The thing is, everybody can come up with great ideas. That's one thing that I learned while I was working at Booking.com, where everybody was working all on the same page and everybody's idea was worth as much as everybody else's. So everybody is capable of coming up with good ideas. And not only the product owners and UX people, what they're doing is just basically guessing with the same research that would be available to you all to see what the main problems and pain points are with the customer experience. So they really don't know what's actually going to be better. They just say, I think this will be better. But we often say it with such authority that it scares people. Just oh yes, I know that this is going to be better because I say it is. So what I have found, and from my experience, is that iOS engineers come up with really great ideas on how to improve products because I've heard you say it multiple times, customer experience and making sure that things, you're all very design aware. You're even talking about how to render shadows and that kind of stuff and how to do animations and performance ways. So I feel like iOS engineers are very close to and dedicated to giving a good user experience. I think it's because Apple is obviously dedicated to that as well. And another thing is that why it doesn't seem obvious to have engineers come to the table, it's that the invisible things impact the user experience just as much as the visible things. So a lot of times people say, I'm going to experiment with this UI element, or I'm going to add this content because it's what they can see. You know what I mean? However, I've run lots of different experiments where they have failed because of the technical implementation, where something wasn't done great and it was less performant and that made it tank. So the code you write, how you write it, and how it renders on the device is just as important as the things that people can see on the screen. So thinking back about the conversion design process, everybody takes part in all of the different process here, and you do it together as a team. Because when you work together as a cross-disciplinary team, you actually create a hive mind kind of thing, and that's called collective intelligence, leaning on each other, bringing your unique perspectives to the table. Everybody, the group, becomes smarter together, right? And when you bring your collective intelligence to the table to make better decisions, that's when you get group collective knowledge that feeds back into that system that I talked about. So, how does conversion design lower risk? Well, if you look at this again, the A/B test there, right at this whole second wheel part of it is the part that really assures that you're making as good of decisions as possible, and it all hinges on that A/B test. And just for those of you who might not be aware of what an A/B test is, it's basically, imagine you have a line of code or a screen on a mobile app, and then you decide, you write a hypothesis about, if I change this, I believe I'll see this change happen in the data or from user behavior. So you can see on the left-hand side, yeah, that's my left. You can see on the left-hand side, let's say there's 3 content blocks, and you say, I believe people will be more focused and then do whatever I want them to do if I change it to 2 content blocks. Then you run it, you get results to see, did I guess correctly, basically? So that's the basic overview of an A/B test. And from there, once you get that statistically significant data from the hypothesis that you write up front to determine how many users actually need to see this experiment, how long do I need to run it for, yada, 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 then you get into the analysis section. And it's in the analysis and decide section where you're able to let data guide the way throughout the entire process, right, in the decisions that you make. So just to put this into really simple, concrete terms, imagine you have a backlog of however many ideas this is, right? And some of the ideas that you have and what you build are going to be good for the user experience in the business. Some of them are going to be really, really bad, and some of them are going to really not make that much of a difference and have no impact at all. So imagine you start with this as the base number of decisions that you can make, and if you work in a linear process, you deliver them all, right? The good, the bad, the non-impactful. And the business results that you get look like this, which is like how a lot of businesses and their results look like. A line that goes up and down, because the bad decisions that you make end up negating the positive impact of the good decisions you make, so you get subpar results. However, imagine if you could identify all the shit choices on the table and just throw them in the bin. Wouldn't that be amazing? Love that. Well, when you do that with conversion design in the A/B test, this is a more probabilistic result of what you would get, the decisions that you've made, where you've thrown away all the bad decisions. You might think, oh, but I worked so hard on all those things. But if they were going to be bad, it's good that you've thrown it away, even if you put the effort into doing it. And then you might actually keep most of the good things, and because it's all statistics and probability, there is a chance you might, deliver some bad things, but overwhelmingly, the odds will now be in your favor because you're using math on your side. And then the results will end up looking something like this. All right, and this actually has a fancy name. It's called the compound effect, and people only really know, they just see the graph going up and to the right, and they're like, that's what we want. But what they're looking for is the compound effect, which is basically making many small good decisions over the course of time to have an exponential gains. And this concept of the compound effect is applicable not only to engineering and business, but it's also equally applicable to your real life and decisions that you make. I'm saying that, but then I make lots of really bad choices on my day-to-day in terms of not exercising and drinking wine before bed, all that stuff you shouldn't do. Anyways, read this book and it'll tell you to make better choices than I do. It's really good. Because in the end, as we work on our product teams, the ultimate goal is to make things better and not just different. But once you start working in this way, you realize how much you're just making things different. And you're just changing things. And what the customer or the user perceives to be an actual improvement is really few and far between. So we write a lot of code that actually doesn't need to be there just because we don't actually understand the impact that we're having. So, another thing that this process helps with is handling complexity. Again, this is a more realistic scenario of how life actually works. Imagine now, go back into your little imagination brains, the system is running, but the system can also go back and forth. So you don't have to go just in one particular way. You can understand and hypothesize and go back to understand. You can prioritize and then say, actually, I don't understand that good enough. Let's go back and do that. And you can design and develop. You can test it and then go back and make another hypothesis. So you can really go throughout the entire system and go back as necessary. So I feel like that, when you iterate like that, you learn a lot more and you do a lot better work, and it's more indicative of how teams actually function. So what's really great about the A/B testing part as well too, and how it helps capture the complexity of not only team dynamics but also the products that we work on, you're able to see in A/B testing tools exactly how you're changing user behavior, all types of performance metrics in there, so you can actually look into the complexity of the data and say, oh, since I've made this change, this metric is performing a lot worse. How about I try implementing it in a slightly different way to improve that metric that I've negatively impacted? So you can actually save experiments that way or implement things with higher quality if you can actually see that data and dig into it. And it's also just effective. Again, I don't know why people are so obsessed with the need for speed, right? Everybody likes going fast. But I would much prefer to be effective. I mean, I feel like engineers like to be lazy, right? Yeah, right? So it seems like, oh, we need to deliver a whole bunch. I also would rather be lazy. So if I can find a way to cut corners or just do something smarter and get just as far or further, the conversion design process helps us do that. And it does that because, like I stated before, with the compound effect, instead of going fast in circles, right, and really not getting anywhere or going forward really slow, if you're lucky, sometimes going back, you're actually taking large strides forward. So you're effectively getting further ahead. But what's tricky is, it seems like it's slower because you have to code the experiment, you have to wait for the results, you have to analyze it. People don't like that shit. They don't like to wait. But I'm telling you, it's worth the wait. So don't be impatient. And I'm a really impatient person. Well, no, I'm actually kind of patient. But just It's fast. Let's just say it that way. It's effective. So how can you all get started with experimentation? First of all, you got to get buy-in. But second of all, you have to have the right tooling to be able to do it. I think a reason why people don't experiment on mobile apps as much as they do in web apps, for example, is because there was no tools that actually supported mobile experimentation. Now, there are companies out there. My favorite one is A.B. Smartly, the guy who built the experimentation platform at Booking.com. He owns this company. He's basically building experimentation platforms. It supports mobile experimentation, Android, iOS, and web. So we no longer have the tooling restrictions that keep us from experimenting. So A.B. Smartly, definitely check that out. They've solved a lot of problems with this new tool that's out. And another thing of how you all can contribute to this as well is when you think about the first two steps in the linear process and you have product managers and UX people and business people all adding their ideas, I have found that there are broadly 3 buckets that experiments fit into. The first one is information and motivation, so like what content and how motivating it is for people to move forward or to complete the task that they need to do. Accessibility and usability, my personal favorite because I am a designer at heart. But the one part of the one bucket where there's not nearly enough ideas and there's so much impact to be had is in the bugs and the technical portion. I have seen when I worked at Booking.com some of the most profoundly impactful things being like cleaning up code, having a major performance impact, getting rid of glitches and bugs. So I feel like when engineers come to the table and participate in the conversion design process, obviously you'll have things to contribute to the other buckets as well, but I really feel like this is what we are missing in conversion design and experimentation. Another thing that you might find useful in your organizations is this hypothesis template. Writing hypothesis seems very simple. However, it's actually very difficult when you sit down to do it. And there are a really great community of people. A guy named Craig Sullivan came up with a hypothesis kit, and this is based on his hypothesis kit with a whole bunch of people that came together to make this template so you can really have good structured thinking and run rigorous controlled experiments by using this hypothesis kit. Something else that might be useful to get your brains flowing is some useful metrics for you all as engineers to try to improve. Is not only conversion, which is the 4th one on the list there, things like increasing sales, which you can do that. You can increase sales simply by making improvements to performance or making things render better or anything. Like you all have a lot of impact that you can make there. But like time to interaction, TTI or whatever people call it, errors, reducing errors. One of the biggest things that when I worked at Booking.com, we would always target the metric of reducing crashes for iOS. So anytime with the design system, we would clean up code, replace it with more stable components. We would see a significant reduction in crashes in different places, which then, if your app is crashing less, more people are actually able to get online and complete whatever it is that they intended. So crashes is a really great metric. Like I said, conversion, as well as different types of performance metrics, such as hitches, which is a new word for me. So you could track hitches and then like try to reduce the number of hitches, which improves the performance, and then ultimately the user experience. So those are just some useful metrics that you can look at as engineers. So how many of y'all are thinking, but Erin, you didn't think about this, but what about that? How about this, right? So this is the but section. We ready for this? Yes? I'm looking at each one of you. Okay. All right, good. We're doing the buts. And if you have other buts, put them in the questions, all right? So the first but that I hear a lot from people is, but we don't have enough users, right? There aren't enough users for us to test on, blah, 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 for us to get statistically significant results. There is some debate in the experimentation community about what is enough users. However, I subscribe to the philosophy of you determine what impact you care about. So clinical trials in medicine industry or whatever, like medicine, they run clinical trials with maybe 100 people, sometimes much fewer than that. And if you observe a huge effect And if you aim for a huge effect and make big changes to things, you're actually able to detect it with much fewer participants in an experiment. So ultimately, you all are the ones that decide, I want to be able to detect this kind of effect, and then from that, you can determine how many users you'd actually need. But you just have to be bolder. You have to make bigger choices, and you can't just, mess around with small, subtle changes. It has to be really, really big, kind of impactful things. So this is debunked. So, and I've run experiments before where I had statistically significant results with, a couple thousand people in each variant, and yeah, it's totally possible to do. You don't have to be working at like the Facebooks or the Googles or the Booking.coms of the world to be able to make data-informed decisions. Another thing that I heard from engineers is that, but it leaves the code base so messy because you have not only the base variant in the code, but then you have the if statements and the experiment tags and yada, 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 and then you have all that other code that you're porting into it. And I got a real simple solution for this one. Just clean it up, yo. Clean it up. Clean it up. But the problem is, because we're so obsessed with going fast or the perception of fast, they think we don't have time to clean this up. I'd be like, trust me, you got the time to clean it up. It's literally, you just go, I could have done it in 5 minutes. I've cleaned up experiments in 5 minutes. Git commit, move on, roll it out, yada, yada. It's fixed. And the thing is, you can also automate it to because of course there are people who be like, I'm not going to clean that up. I mean, I don't clean my house. So getting me to clean my experiments up when I worked at Booking.com was just kind of like somebody needed to poke me. Just like, Erin, clean that. And you can automate systems to identify when experiment tags have been in a code base too long, and then you can get blame and then trigger emails to people to say, you have 3 uncleaned experiments. You're not going to be able to roll out. You can't release any more. So you can actually set up guardrails and systems to make sure that your code base remains clean. So clean it up. That's the one for that. Just clean it. And then people will also say, oh yeah, but what about releases and updates? We release only every other week or whatever. We don't do weekly releases. And then after we release, it usually takes a month for us to get to 60% of people updating, blah, blah, blah. So that's another thing that is unique to experimenting on mobile apps, which is valid. I completely understand that. However, there is also back-end UI, rendering the layouts from the back end. How many of you render things from the back end, render layout from the back end? Okay. So very few people. Okay, cool. So that is actually one really good way, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more mobile apps with back-end UI or server-driven UI in the next few years once businesses realize how impactful experimentation can be, because when you render layout and design with design systems, centralizing all your design foundations on the back end, you can change things on the fly. And then there is no dependency on rollouts or updates or releases or anything like that. So backend or server-driven UI is the solution to that. So get on it, yo. So now, just for some fun examples, because I'm already over time, so we'll just go quickly through this. Here's a fun example of when I worked on a mobile app at Booking.com. It's now a sunset application because it was a really bad idea. This is being recorded. It was a bad idea. I'll just say it directly. It wasn't a great idea. It was basically a copy of Hotels Tonight because it was a knee-jerk reaction, that exists. This app needs to exist. So basically what happens was I was looking through the data and I saw that the very first step was to get somebody's email to sign up to have an account, right? And then to be able to make a booking. The problem was a huge amount of people weren't finishing inputting their email, which is the most basic thing. And what I realized was, when I looked through it and I did it myself, is that the visual indication on that very first form field that people were presented with was an inaccessible blue color, and there was no focus state on the form field. So it wasn't really prominent that the field was active. And I think they just kind of threw it together, and there might not have been any guidance from an UI perspective about how to actually code this up. So what I did is I talked to Moises, my wonderful iOS engineer, and we're like, Moises, we gotta do this better. So we coded up something that was significantly more visible. I mean, it wasn't hit you in the face, but we did use accessible colors, and it made a drastic increase in terms of, not only people getting through that flow, but increased conversion, the number of people that were finishing their bookings because they could actually work that form field. So in that case, when you think about having a big impact, sometimes tiny changes like that in the right spots can actually make a really big impact because we are able to detect that effect with a hypothesis with a few thousand users in each variant. Here's another really fun one. I don't know why, but they let me write code when I worked at Booking.com. But I can only do like web development stuff, mainly HTML and CSS, and I can break stuff in JavaScript in really unique ways. So this experiment here, you can see, oh wow, my cursor's been there the whole time. Has that been bothering anybody? Because that would bug the shit out of me. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I'm cursing so much. I forgot that this is here. I curse a lot. I'll just say it to the camera. I swear a lot. I'm very sorry. So in this particular one, I was doing some user research, and I had seen that somebody had zoomed in to see the property details. And when they zoomed in, this was right when Retina screens were being introduced. So they got a big face full of pixels when they tried to zoom into that. And I was like, ooh, that's not good. So then I looked into the code to see, okay, well, where are we pulling these images? How big are they? How much bigger can I make them? How do I make this just a better experience? And I noticed that they were also cropped really oddly. So I was like, I just need to improve the photo viewing experience here. So what I ended up doing is, because I'm a designer, and I love to make things sexy and wonderful and beautiful, so I was like, I'm going to pick the 500 wide pixel photos, 500 by 500 or whatever they were, as opposed to picking, any number of dimensions that we had available to us. Because when you zoomed in, you could go the whole way in, and it was still crystal clear. It was just beautiful. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to code that one up. It's going to be amazing. I released it. The data came back, and it was completely insignificant. It made no difference whatsoever, unless you looked at the performance metrics, in which case, I think I impacted it by increasing the page load time by 1 or 2 seconds. So then I thought, oh my God, this should be so negative. Why is this not tanking conversion horrifically? So then I thought, okay, I'm going to be reasonable. And this is why experimentation is great for engineers, because it kind of forces your designers to be reasonable, because we're going to put shadows on everything. It's going to be so bling if you let us do whatever we want. But if we can see that it's actually having a bad impact on people, then we'll start to change our behavior. So it's only through experimentation and by coding up my own design decisions that I've realized that, oh, actually how it's built matters a lot. It matters so much. So I think I scaled it back to 250 pixels, and then magically it increased conversion because there wasn't that performance hit anymore. It did increase the page load time by a minuscule amount, but it wasn't nearly as ridiculous as my idea was. So there you go. That's why we need to test things, because designers will tell you, yeah, just use the big images, and they'll have no idea what they're talking about. They'll just say it looks pretty, and you'll be like, all right, I'll just do what I'm told to do. Push back. You should really push back if you see us making stupid choices. So in summary, conversion design process makes a lot of sense for these reasons, because it allows everybody to bring their best ideas to the table, and engineers have wonderful ideas on how to improve the user experience and make a good business impact. It also lowers risk for businesses because you're able to make more good choices, or up the probability that the choices you make are going to be better than if you were just literally rolling things out. It also handles complexity a lot better. You're able to understand more of what's going on. And it's effective, not fast, because it helps us be, lazy, go a little bit slower, be more thoughtful. So don't be fast and break things. Just go slow and be thoughtful, and you can have a huge impact. That said, The Compound Effect is the book that I recommended. So if you like to read, I recommend that one. It's very short. AV Smartly is a really great mobile testing platform that you can use. And my book, which I promise it'll be fun and have stuff in there for engineers as well, is called Design for Impact. It'll come out in 2024. And if you want to get a little notification, you can check out my website. If you sign up for my email list, I sent 1 email, I think ever, or 2 emails ever. So I promise I will not spam you. I'll just be like, hey, remember that time that I told you that I was going to read a book, and then I had this email list that I didn't do anything with for years? You'll get an email, and I'll say, it's out now. And that's it. That's me. Thanks for listening.